and even the right of athletes to join a knee or join hands or whatever. Have things been completely fixed? No. We still have significant room to go. But I am very, very impressed with the largely young people's movement of all races and ethnicities, joined by people of all ages, really, to bring the changes in the public square.
Thank you. Pastor Anderson, please, same question. Have things really, are you seeing some substantive change since the George Floyd murder, or does the Breonna Taylor verdict kind of represent a regression?
Well, thank you, Rabbi Weiner, my dear, dear friend, and to all of these who are with us today, and certainly my panelists and colleagues. I'm so excited to be invited today. It depends, your question really depends upon the contextualization. If you're just talking about George Floyd, last night I was looking at the wonderful expose documentary on John Lewis.
Yeah.
And so certainly since the early 1960s, especially the March to Selma's, through the Edmund Pettus Bridge, 1965, things have certainly migrated, they've moved, they've changed. When we look at George Floyd this year, Breonna Taylor this year, and then the grand jury decision, certainly we, like my colleague has said, we have a long way to go. We've made some strides, some better than others, but we have a long way to go. And I would just add this caveat to what my colleague has said. It concerns me that while our young people are mobilized and organized in these multi-ethnic marches, which I applaud, if this thing becomes normalized, like we expect the grand juries and we expect attorney generals to even look at the scene, look at the footage from the cameras, and still it's the same result. For me, the young people that I see, it becomes normalized and it becomes expected. And this is something that we cannot stand for. We've got to continue to move forward. And this is not going to be a situation or a condition. We must never let it be a condition where this is to be expected. We've got to change the expectation.
Amongst many things in our current climate that we hope are not normalized. Indeed, indeed. Bishop Tyson, please, same question. Do you have a sense of hopefulness about the post-George Floyd kind of cultural awakening, or do you feel that things haven't changed fast enough?
Great question to my colleagues and fellow African-American clergy that just spoke, and to all of you all that are on the call. Thank you for this opportunity to have this ecumenical moment to share. The late Sam Cooke wrote a song, I think in the late 60s or early 70s, that says, it's been a long time coming, but a change is going to come. Well, the song was awesome. It was certainly visionary, but we're still waiting on that change. I read a quote the other day that said, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is to plant one today. So there's been some great seeds planted, and scripture is tailored to teach us that you can't get a harvest unless you plant a seed. And so there's a lot of people that are planting good seeds, and they're from all different races and cultures and religions across America. And so we have to remain optimistic and have to remain faithful and hopeful that things are going to change. But for every George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and Ahmaud Arbery that we hear about, there's 30 others that never make the news media. You have great people out now, like this young guy, Morehouse graduate. If you haven't been following him, his name is Sean King. He has an incredible grassroots organization that spends $250,000 to get these stories out in the media and present them in a manner that's not negative so that it can get the attention that it deserves. The whole situation with the verdict of Breonna Taylor is just mind-boggling. It's hard to understand. Even lawyers are struggling with that verdict. And I keep hearing the law is a law. And so I'm struggling. I'm just not okay, to be honest with you. It's like before I lay down tonight, there's going to be another situation. And by the time I wake up in the morning, there's going to be a new one. And we're just tired. And one of the things that Carl and I talked about when we put together the conversation with the chief of police, Chief Best, when we were showing her support at my church, we coined this phrase, continuing the conversations. And this is not a moment, but it's a movement. And in our culture and our race for so long, we have the tendency to be mad for a moment. And society sees us as that way, that, okay, they're gonna be mad, they're gonna protest and burn some stuff up for a couple of days, and then it'll be back to normal. But no, people have been rioting since George Floyd's murder. They've been protesting, and they're not stopping. Some cities are into almost 200 days of nonstop protesting.
The ladies.
You're muted there.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, sorry.
I had a doorbell rung in my home. Someone's here to pick up something. And so if that make any sense, that's just kind of where I'm at. We're struggling, guys. We really appreciate the Jewish-Christian relationship that we have, all the work that the great Jewish leaders have done as it relates to civil rights movement, and the great things that you've done and promoted to help us to move forward this concern. But we're hurting, and our story needs to be heard. But the Jewish story needs to be heard as well. And just merging those two intersects together is what I'm looking forward to. And that's why I'm on this call, because every opportunity I have to share with my Jewish brothers and sisters is just enlightening and empowerment for me.
Thank you so much. I know one of the things that I cherish most is not just the individual relationships I have with the three of you, but also this wider, wonderful gathering of about 10 reverends and 10 rabbis who have been studying text together and talking about these issues for the better part of a year or so. And so when this issue of the summer came up, we had a basis of relationship to talk about it in a more substantive way rather than just speaking to the moment. Something that the three of, Carl, you brought this up, and also Carey, you brought this up as well, and that is some of the interesting partnership between the older leadership, or kind of the generational leadership in the Black community, and some of the younger leadership. And I know that the three of you were very involved with CHOP and things on Capitol Hill, and you mentioned about supporting Chief Best previously. Let me start with Pastor Anderson. Do you see a real disconnect between kind of the older generation of leadership and the Black community and the younger kind of Black Lives Matter cohort of folks? Do you see them working together? Do you see them kind of working on separate paths, or sometimes even maybe conflicting paths? What's your sense about that? Then I want to hear from Pastor Livingston and Bishop Tyson as well, please.
One of the things that I always share with groups that mobilize, it's okay to be in different lanes. Let's just make sure we're staying on the same freeway. And so as we look at the Black Lives Matter movement, and I'm not going to address the issue of those hijacking the name and hijacking the caricature of it for other means. But when you look at the generation that marched in the civil rights movement, they really tried to embody the masses of people. In Martin Luther King's work, talking about the bus boycott in Montgomery, Alabama, stride toward freedom. He describes in great detail how they may have started in the church, but they also went to the bars. They also went to the clubs. They also went to the streets to mobilize this movement, to organize and to set a chart, a course of action that's going to benefit all. So one of the things that I would encourage, I guess I'm in that older spectrum now, I'm in my 60s, although I feel 35, I'm in my 60s. But the Black Lives Matter, they have the momentum, they have the energy, but they need some of the memory that they don't have and some of the experience that they have yet not acquired from the generations like me and above to help stay on the same freeway, although we may be in different lanes on how to get there. Let's stay on the same freeway. And I think we can make some substantive change. That's what I would like to offer.
Thank you. No, I like that metaphor a lot. Pastor Livingston, kind of the same question about the generational divide, and particularly with your work at Seattle Central, which is in many ways a hotspot of youth activism. Some of your sense about the kind of different generational divide in the Black community, about response to all the things that are happening.
Well, the African American community now is similar, I think, if I understand it, to where the Jewish community in Central and Southern Europe was not so much in Spain before Ferdinand and Isabella, but in Central and Southern Europe, where going into the Middle Ages, things got so tough, if not before, that they had to change the rule of survival. And I think it also had to do too with some of the peoples that came and did terrible things to Jewish people, so that Jewishness began to attach not to the father, not to being a child of the father, but a child, as the Torah, I believe, says, but as a child of the mother. It's a rule of survival, and it's reminiscent of the fact too that the families were starting to struggle. The families were having difficulty holding together, if I understand it right. Well, we definitely have that happen in the African American community, and now it's going on about 3 generations. And what happens over time is that each younger generation loses more and more respect for those that they feel had led us as a people, because they feel like, we're not doing any better with your leadership. Where are you? And some of them don't quite understand how difficult it is in a society that has gone from segregation up to 1970, backed by the United States government, mainly directed against African American adults and especially males, to a society of the Southern strategy from 1970 to the present, still doing something similar. But there's no excuse. We still have to figure out a way to give the people economic development so that they can have real educational gains, real social gains to bring our families back together, and health and other gains that we need to survive. So as a result, this younger generation coming up, they're born around middle 1990s and the 2000s, some of them don't want to go to church. Some of them don't want to listen to pastors. And many of them are out there leading the movement right now. And they're in the CHOP area and the CHOPs all around the country. And we are really working to try to be relevant to them, to let them know that we're there to help them understand the things we are doing, to help them, us as a people rise economically and deal with the criminal injustice that we're dealing with in the criminal justice system. So that's kind of, it's like a lot of things are being asked of the spiritual leaders right now and the political leaders in the African American community. And we're working so hard to try to deliver. And a lot of times the people are still saying it's not enough. We don't think you're there. We're not impressed with what you're doing. And so that's the very difficult job that we have out there. I even see it up at Seattle Central amongst the students.
Sure, absolutely. No, thank you, thank you, thank you. Bishop Tyson, I want to kind of turn it into to another direction a little bit. Are you? I see your name on the screen. You still there? I think. All right, he might have taken a break for a moment. Then let me turn to Pastor Anderson. All of us are, of all persuasions, are thinking a lot about the next 35 days leading up to the election and what it will take to make some changes in this country, perhaps. What do you think, particularly, are the implications of Kamala Harris's nomination as vice president for the Democratic Party? Do you think that it will inspire greater activism and turnout in the Black community in terms of voting? Will it make a change in the role and impact of Black leaders in government in general? Do you see this as a watershed? Do you see this as an effective way to really evoke greater response from the African American community leading up to the election, Pastor Anderson?
Thank you. Excellent question. What I'd like to offer is I think her nomination as the VP candidate is historic. I think it's certainly something that the nation is geared for, but there are also segments of our community that see this as just another way to divide and conquer. I see the politicism behind the right-wing sect of people saying we definitely cannot have this far radical left person 1 heartbeat away from the White House or the Oval Office, and it will be used, I'm afraid, as a political ploy to incite and excite those that are operating from a fear-based mentality. So it's going to be inspirational for a lot of young people, a lot of people that have hope, dreams, and aspirations. It will be just as divisive on the other side for those who cannot yet see a Black woman, let alone a female of any race, really, to come to that place.
No, thank you. Thank you. Bishop Tyson, same question. Kamala Harris's nomination as vice president for the Democratic Party, is this going to, you think, activate further the African American community in this upcoming election, as if there weren't other reasons to be activated? But do you think that this is going to really be have significant impact, or is there kind of a fatigue from getting involved in generalized politics?
Well, Pastor Anderson spoke to it incredibly well, and I concur with him that from our community, we're kind of on the fence with Kamala Harris. It's just what it is. We don't support people based upon the color of their skin. If that was the case, we all would have voted for Jesse Jackson to be president of the United States of America. And we did not. We love him, but when it comes to sitting in that position, I think Jesse and Kamala would be better than who we have sitting there now, of course. Don't get me wrong on that. Anything is better than what we got. But she has not always been favorable to her own race, as it relates to when you go back and you look at her record as, Attorney General for the state of California. She didn't, rule well. A lot of the rulings that she made was not favorable to our people. The injustices in the criminal justice system has always been against African Americans, and she did not do anything to help that. But do people change? Absolutely. We give them room, place, and space to change. Hopefully for the better, not so much like the Republicans who are now changing based upon statements that we have recorded that they said about, you should not elect a Supreme Court justice, in your final year president. And I go on record saying this, and I'll stand by this. And all of a sudden that's changed. so they have a different viewpoint all of a sudden when it's favorable to their party. So we appreciate change, but for the better. And so we're prayerful, we're hopeful. And as Pastor Carey said, man, listen, Joe Biden is no spring chicken, and she is one heart. If he gets elected and she gets elected, she's one heartbeat away from the presidency. So overnight she can become it, and so of course we'll support her and we'll pray for her and hope that she does the best. But I just don't want people to always think that in our race that we judge who we vote for based upon the color of their skin.
No.
And I think hopeful for young ladies, though. I think to see an African-American female to achieve what she's achieved is amazing. So from that vantage point, I love it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Listen, please, the assumption wasn't that, listen, as much as I think when Joe Lieberman ran, a lot of Jews were very excited about that. I think a lot of people also obviously made decisions based on something other than tribal, communal connection, what have you. Pastor Livingston, Kamala Harris, do you think that she represents a different view at the highest reaches of government in a way that perhaps might excite folks, particularly in the African American community, who have been not as excited previously, or at least since Obama?
Only a little bit, and that little bit because there were many people looking for a woman, especially a black woman, after the support of African Americans to help basically save Biden's candidacy, and especially in South Carolina, and they know that African Americans voted at a high percentage. The men at a high percentage for him, but the women slightly even higher. And so African American women took this to say, hey, listen, it's our turn now. And then it came down to who was the best fit for Biden. And I think the connection with his son made him feel like Kamala Harris was the best fit. It also helps that she's getting the support of AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and Representative Ilhan Omar, people like that, who this younger generation really care about. They identify with them, not so much because of their more socialist ideas, but because of their, they just are clear, strong, assertive women that speak truth to power and that will lock on the economic injustices and really make the argument that it's unfair and it's got to be changed now. The middle class, they like Kamala Harris, the black middle class. She's a graduate of Howard. She's educated, accomplished, and she can do that. They got a little video of her doing a little stomp, and she stood up for herself. I think in the debate, she framed it real well. I was that little girl, and they just feel like she handled herself well. She may not have done well in the primaries, but she's a formidable person. So it's going to help a little bit, and that little bit matters.
I know, absolutely. Listen, I am anxious for that vice presidential debate. Believe me. Pastor Anderson, I'm recently reading Eddie Glaude's book on James Baldwin called Begin Again, which I recommend to everybody. And he reminds us that Baldwin, especially after the assassination of Dr. King, became very cynical about whether the civil rights movement actually accomplished everything it was purported to have accomplished. What's your sense about Baldwin's cynicism? What's the legacy of the civil rights movement more broadly? And do you feel that perhaps that legacy sometimes is overstated, particularly in the white community, as a way of in essence saying, well, all of the major issues of structural racism have been addressed. Maybe there's a few things to do along the margins, but the main things were accomplished 50 years ago by Dr. King. Baldwin really very early on understood that to be a delusion and a kind of an American mythology for the white for the white community. What's your sense about Baldwin's cynicism about the civil rights movement? Was it well founded, or has the movement really did it really accomplish as much as we tend to mythologize, or do you feel like sometimes that's used as cover for white negligence when it comes to the lasting legacy of structural racism? Pastor Anderson, please.
Excellent question. We must demystify some things. The civil rights movement, with all of its genius and all of its glory, was not a solve all of the issue campaign. James Baldwin represents a group that you're slapped down so many times, when you're kicked in the back so many times, when you're brutalized and discriminated against so many times. Well, what might be the current rhetoric or the tea being spilt of the day may not be your present reality. And so as a result, you say enough is enough. I think James Baldwin, with all of his genius, had come to the conclusion enough is enough. And he wasn't the only one. There are others that went on to other countries. I'm thinking of Josephine Baker, for one, and she's another one that left the United States. Can't say too much about Tina Turner. I think that was her own choice. God bless her in her pursuits. But we see not a monolithic thing. We're seeing, we have to look at this thing from a kaleidoscope effort. Everyone's lens is different. Everyone's experience is different. And for James Baldwin, for him, it was time to leave. My hope is that no matter how this presidential race shakes out, our young people will not lose faith in the electoral process. My hope is no matter how this thing shakes out, and I do believe whichever side, whether Democrat or Republican, there's going to be, hopefully you understand this in the context in which I'm saying, a national holocaust. There's going to be a burning. There's going to be some inflammatory things. There's going to be some marches, some protests. There's going to be some streets and some cities burning. There's going to be a fallout here, no matter which way this political thing shakes out in the next few weeks. But my hope is that we will keep faith in the process and try to do our best as citizens to perfect the process. To use an illustration from sports, I grew up with the Oakland A's. I grew up in Oakland. Kamala Harris is from Oakland. The San Francisco 49ers, Oakland Raiders, they were always my team. But the San Francisco Giants, my favorite team, Willie Mays, Willie McCovey, and that group, they never made it. They went to the World Series in 1962, but I never gave hope on the Giants. And so when they began to win the World Series in 2010, 2012, 2014, all of those years I had been waiting, I finally got to see them in their glory firsthand. My hope is that our young people will be inspired, even though they may not get what they are expecting out of this election, to not lose hope and to keep and stay in the process of the political realm for our nation, because they are the change that we need to see.
Thank you so much. And you absolutely spoke to a metaphor that speaks to my heart, because I'm a longtime Giants fan, and it took, 53 years to get 3 World Series. Talk about hope, talk about faith. If you were a Giants fan, I mean, next to being a Cubs fan and used to be a Boston Red Sox fan, those were the ultimate kind of acts of faith to keep watching those games. Bishop Tyson, a sense of James Baldwin's critique of the civil rights movement, and whether he was accurate in reminding us not to over-ascribe too much progress to what Dr. King achieved.
Yeah, sometimes we set our expectations too high, and then sometimes we set them too low. James Baldwin, genius, his mind, the way he thought things through was phenomenal. I just wish there were more writings, or there were more conversations that were recorded about his thought pattern, why he thought what he thought. It's kind of hard to explain to Black Lives Matters young people what the civil rights movement really felt like in those real-time moments. They're in a generation where they don't tolerate much. They have no patience. Not speaking against the Black Lives Matters movement, because I love them. They are phenomenal. But I'm just saying, just the generational gap of where they are and how they move, the movements of Dr. King. You know, Malcolm X didn't agree with a lot of movements he made, and then they came together at the end and came on common path, you know. I wish he had stayed, you know, because we needed his voice, and we needed his courage, and we needed his insight to help make a difference. Whoopi Goldberg said on live TV that if Trump became the president, she was moving. Well, I saw her this morning on The View, and she ain't going nowhere. She's still here, you know. And so I think it was Dr. James Dobson who wrote a book. He says, in his book, he made this quote. He says, "Be careful with your emotions because you can't trust them. Because one day you'll feel like you're on top of the mountain, and by noon you'll be down in the valley." Our emotions are all over everywhere. And so you can't make decisions when you're hungry. You can't make decisions when you are emotional. You know, and I think personally, that's just my opinion. I think he made an emotional decision to move on. But I do think he hit on something really, really strong as relates to what was right about the movement and what was really kind of wrong about the movement. But at the end of the day, there was movement. All right. We can make a choice to do something, or we can make a choice to do nothing. And there was a group of people that decided, like Rosa Parks, that I'm going to do something. And today I'm going to keep my seat, you know. And so I respect people like him and their opinion and their decisions, but I just really wish there was more recordings of something that we could really figure out what he was really saying and why he was saying what he was saying.
No, you're absolutely right. One of the most powerful elements in this book is a writing from Baldwin where he was in Paris. He had kind of given up on America. And when he saw photographs of, and forgive me, I can't remember her name, one of really the little girl who was going to school, I think in Little Rock when they had desegregated the school, and she was walking through that gauntlet of people who were spitting on her and screaming at her. And Baldwin said, when I was sitting there in Paris and I saw her face, I knew I had to go back to America and I had to take up the battle again. I had to take up the fight. I couldn't just decide to be away. And I think that's even more broadly for many of us who have this sense of, you know, America is not really what we had hoped it would be, and if it goes in a certain direction, we're going to give up. I think Baldwin's process of leaving and then returning, I think, is a powerful dynamic. In our last few minutes here, I'm going to start with you, Pastor Livingston. Just more broadly, a message to us on our holiest day, our Day of Atonement here for the Jewish people, on the cusp of probably. I know that it's said oftentimes as cliche, but I think in this case it's genuine. Probably the most impactful and the most definitive and consequential election in the history of our country. Very briefly, a message as a leader in the Black community to the Jewish community, communities that have so long stood together as allies, have had similar histories of oppression and difficulty, and have increased sensitivities for one another's pain and an increased desire to work together to overcome all of the challenges that minority communities face in this country. I'm going to go through all three of you, please. Kind of a final message for us, Pastor Livingston, on this special day for the Jewish people.
Well, it's the Jewish vote is so important, and Jewish support, Jewish money is so important in this election. And Donald Trump believes that he just won your support again. And when I say again, I don't mean that most all Jewish people vote and Jewish Americans voted for Trump, but he won a significant amount of support in 2016, and he believes he's won that support again, if not more, because of what he's done by moving the capital to Jerusalem, and by the peace agreements with, I think, United Arab Emirates and some other entity, and Israel. And while arguably those are good things, I want to also just encourage Jewish Americans, Jewish Washingtonians, and folks in King County to be thinking also about the other Jewish interests, about taking care of the immigrant and taking care of the other quartet of the vulnerable, whether we're talking about the widows and the orphans and the priests or the rabbis and the people in the church who are vulnerable, because if you don't support them, they don't usually have that kind of support directly, because they're given their time, if it's a rabbi, to working or something like that. And what Donald Trump has done, taking kids away from babies, what he has done in terms of challenging democracy, what he's done in terms of hollowing out Obamacare, the evil things that he has said about various peoples, including African and Central American and people, and all of that. I know that you'll bring all of those things to bear, and you'll vote your conscience and your values and the law in ways that will be the kind of decision that will help our country move forward. This is quite an election coming up, and Trump thinks that he has put together a winning strategy. He's basically saying, if I win, it was fair, and if I lose, I was cheated, and so I am going to challenge the election. And he's also intimated that he's not only going to challenge this election, but he's going to stay in power. And then he's going to make an argument that he was robbed of his first term. So we're looking at the makings of a dictatorship. This is the greatest threat to democracy and constitutional government in the history of the country. And the worst thing is not even Trump himself. But the worst thing of all is that the person I think that's the most evil person in the world, Vladimir Putin, has compromised on Trump. One of the books that just came out is calling Trump a Manchurian candidate. Strzok, S-T-R-Z-O-K, Strzok, I'm probably mispronouncing his name, his book. And I believe the book that's getting ready to come out, I don't know if that's McMaster, I think it's McMaster, but it's supposed to come out in October. It's supposed to go farther. These things are extremely serious. And Vladimir Putin and Russia have not had a very good relationship with Jewish people. I know that in some ways he's reaching out an olive branch, in other ways he has been like other Russian leaders that have compromised the business interests and the religious interests and the social interests of Jewish people. And so I really believe Jewish people will have a conversation amongst themselves and not let some of the surface things he's done cause you to vote. As much as, love Israel, love Jerusalem, I know that you care about Palestinian people. I hope you'll keep pushing that situation so that there's some kind of solution for the West Bank. We give the Israelis, not the Jewish, sorry, it's more specifically the Israelis credit for pulling out of Gaza, but to not forget the Palestinian people. But the surface things he's doing, he's hoping will buy your support. And hopefully you will say, there's so many other issues that are very important to us. We need you so much to take a stand regarding this election with us.
I think, let me just clarify one thing. Thank you so much, and that's a wonderful message. I just want to clarify one thing.
Please.
Probably for the last 40 years, Jews have voted 75% Democrat, 25% Republican. And I think in the 2018 election, it was 80% Democratic candidates
Oh
and
man.
20%, which is really angering Trump because
Oh
he,
wow.
he feels that the Jewish people are going to vote the way that you're saying, that if he throws a few bones here or there and he mentions Israel, I would say there's about 15 to 20% of the American Jewish population who only votes through the litmus test of Israel. The other 75 to 80% consistently for decades have voted their values, not about Israel specifically.
Thank
So
you.
just
Thank
want to clarify that. Pastor Anderson, a final word for us, for the Jewish community on its holiest day as we move into this incredible period in our country's history.
Again, briefly, thank you, Rabbi Weiner, for inviting me to this platform to be a part of this distinguished body of people. And this, in one of your high holy days, I'm just honored to be sharing with you. I might ask us as people of faith and Americans to remember the other as we go into this season of the election for the next president of the United States. Martin Luther King gave one of his last speeches at Stanford University, The Other America, in which he draws a picture between the affluent, the rich, flowing with milk and honey, but then there's another side, people that are living on the edge, people that are in the margins still, and help us as a nation grow and become a nation of care and concern by remembering the other America, and let these things be our passion and promote us to vote our conscience. And so I say to all of these that are here, God bless you, and we wish you shalom.
Thank you so much. And finally, Bishop Tyson, please, a message to us on this holiest of our days in this incredibly important period in our country's history.
Absolutely, on your holy of holiest days, on your Sabbath of all Sabbaths, on this wonderful time of atonement. I'm reminded of a story of this high school senior and this girl who he had known since the 9th grade, who was somewhat of a tomboy. She always dressed in boy clothes. And when it came time for the high school homecoming dance, he invited her to the dance. He was this letterman in football and popular kid at school, and everybody wondering why would he invite her. And then when he walked into this homecoming dance with her, she looked phenomenal. She was not in tomboy clothes. She was in this beautiful gown, had her hair done and makeup done. And every boy who knew her from being a tomboy wanted to dance with her. And they kept trying to interrupt the boy that brought her to the dance. And finally he says, well, it's up to you if you want to dance with them. And she turned to the boys and she says, no, I'm going to dance with the one that brought me. And I want to say to you all, on your holiest of holiest days, Sabbath of all Sabbaths, Jewish community, keep dancing with the one that brought you. Keep doing what you've been doing. Prayer is the Jewish faith secret weapon. There are so many tremendous stories in the Old Testament about the Jewish people being people of prayer. Prayer brought you, prayer has kept you, and prayer will see you through. And so what I would ask as a Christian, that you would continue to pray for our country, pray for all of the racial unrest in our country, in America. Pray for all leaders, world leaders, not just in America, but pray for world leaders. Pray for peace and pray for forgiveness and pray that we will all come to repentance. Dance with the one that brought you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And so my deepest appreciation to Pastor Livingston, Pastor Anderson, Bishop Tyson. Thank you so much. And God bless the three of you in your ministries, in your lives, And may you and your families remain safe and well. And we look forward to many more years of our communities working together to align our world more closely with God's vision for this world. Many thanks also to Zoe for moderating in the background, and to all of you for coming out on this very special day for this really important discussion. I've recorded it, and I will be sharing it on our website soon. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank all of you. And again, Gamar Chatima Tova to all of us. A good sealing in the book of life as the gates of repentance come to a close in these final hours of this Yom Kippur. Thank you so much. Take care. God bless everybody. Thank you.